Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Live with Jia Xin, and today's topic is very interesting. It's about Scope 3 emissions, and I believe I've seen like a lot of discussioning happening now online. Okay, so yeah, let's dive into this topic today, a very exclusive topic to our BBC audience. All right, so welcome everyone. Those from Malaysia, I hope you had your lunch already. And yeah, if you're online with me now, so say hi in the comment so that I can know that hey, who are with me today. And if let's say you have any questions about scope 3 emissions, whether you are just about to get your hands dirty on scope 3 or you are already doing it and you face some challenges, some problems, and you feel like you want to ask it to me, then yeah, feel free to drop your questions in the comment. All right. Okay, so for those who are new with us today, I will walk you through the agenda, what it will be look like. So in this 45 minutes session, I will start with a short presentation about the topic of the day and will be followed by Q&A. All right, so let's wait no more. We will begin now. Hi Monisa. Hi Abalaga. Welcome everyone. Okay, so let me share my screen in a bit. Okay, I hope you guys can see my screen now. Okay, all right, I think everything is clear and let's begin. So today's topic is very direct. It's about scope 3 emissions explained. I will explain you about the what is scope 3, the why are we measuring scope 3, and the most important question, how to calculate scope 3 and report it. Okay, so I'm Jia Xin and I'm the ESG and sustainability consultant and a trainer from 𝗵𝗱𝗱 Business Consulting. All right, so this is what today's agenda will look like. And remember, next will be on the 20th of May, 2 p.m. Okay, so let's go direct to the first question. What are scope 3 emissions? So scope 3 is actually indirect GHG emissions, but we know that we have scope 2, which we measure the indirect emissions from purchased power. And then this scope 3. So it means that it's any other indirect emissions other than scope 2. So there are 50 you will need to report scope 3. Okay, so scope 3, they are the emissions of consequent will cover other scope 1 and scope 2 because you producing your product using facility. Is a facility owned or controlled by you. But scope 3, it's the upstream, as in like, do you get raw material and about the down. So these I think people, you guys are familiar with this diagram. Okay, so it shows you the differences between scope 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so here, I will check with you on the upstream activities. That million point. Hold on, yeah, I think there's internet. Okay, thank you for the feedback. Okay, so let me check on the internet connectivity, yeah? Okay, is it? Oh, the slides are not shared. Okay, I think I'm back online. Okay, can you guys see my screen now? I think we are back on smooth. Okay, I think we are back. Okay, so I will proceed with that. Thank you so much for your feedback. I can see Michael is online, Sano as well. Okay, let's continue. All right. Okay, so I think I'll resume here. All right, so here, what are scope 3 emissions? So scope 3 emissions are actually indirect GHG emissions. But when we say that other than scope 2 will be scope 3. Okay, so a little bit about scope 3 is that it is an option piece which the source are controlled or owned by you. But for scope 3 is different because it's the emissions from the consequence of the activities of the company. So it can be from the upstream or from the downstream activities. All right, so here you from your employer to prove your machine electric. All those are the emissions from scope 1 and scope 2. So what about scope 3? If you look at the upstream activities, the examples is where do you get your metal sheet from? Where do you get your tire from? So all those you get it from a supplier. So those are emissions from the upstream. And when we do you manage the waste? Hi everyone, I'm back. Hold on a minute, yeah.
We'll try not to share the slides for you. Import the slides.
这样就没有 any。Hang on a minute, yeah, guys. So while waiting for the slides to be shown, so if let's say you have any questions, okay, you can put it up in the comment now. Hi, Monish, welcome. Okay, great. All right, so we are back. Okay, just check before I continue with the presentation. Can you guys see the screen? Can you guys hear me clearly? Okay, great. Thank you, Aaron, for the feedback. Okay, sure. So let's continue now. Okay, so when we say about scope 3 emissions, there are 15 categories here. Okay, so what are the 15 categories? So you can see that we have 8 in the upstream activities and also 7 for the downstream activities. So can you let me check with our audience here today? So have you done anything? Which categories are you looking into now? Okay, so you can tell me in the comment which categories that you are measuring the carbon emissions at this moment. Okay, we have a response from Monish saying that 6 and 7, yes, for the employee commuting and business travel, because I guess that is the requirement from Bursa Malaysia for the past 2 years. Okay, now they have changed it already because of the launch of the NSRF, National Sustainability Reporting Framework. Okay, so here, other than that, anyone else measuring other categories? I guess 6 and 7 are the most popular right now. Nisha, hello Nisha. Oh yeah, same, employee commuting and business travel. I guess if let's say you guys have any questions when you are quantifying these emissions, just feel free to drop it in the comment and let's have a discussion today, okay? All right, so I guess 6 and 7 are the most popular now because it's mandatory. All right. So let's talk. I'll share a little bit more on my personal experience measuring other categories. If let's say, I guess you guys are familiar with the carbon emissions factor from the 𝗵𝗲𝗱𝘆. which is published by the UK government, because it's quite complete actually to measure, I would say, most of the 15 categories. So some of it that you might want to look into moving forward in the future. It could be waste generated in operations, and then purchase goods and services, capital goods, leased assets, and also transportation, upstream and downstream transportations. So usually is that once you have your purchase raw material data, then you will get to know how much is it, what is the weight, where does it come from, how far is it from your factory, and then you will have a lot of questions coming out. Oh, do they use how big is the ship, what kind of container, do they travel by lorry on road, so what is the way, what is the port that it landed. Okay, so these are all the questions that you might came across when you start to measuring the carbon emissions from other categories. Okay, so next, so here is an example on how to get started. So you think, oh, so many 15 categories, but I'm not sure like how to begin with. So you can look at this, like an automobile manufacturer. It has like a life cycle, the life cycle of your product. Okay, so it started with material acquisition and pre-processing. So at this life cycle stage, then you will have your raw materials. Okay, then we'll think of, oh, where do they come from? What are the upstream transportations? Okay, then next, you will go to production. So in the production stage, you will have some questions coming up, such as, oh, if I'm using grid electricity, during the transmission process, is there any loss? Okay, how is the electricity being generated? Okay, and then you also have, oh, do I have any lease assets, or how do because the production is run by people, so for your employee, then how do they come to work? Okay, so these are the like emissions from employee commuting. Okay, all right, then after your goods are produced, then you will go to the distribution and storage stage. So do you store it in your own warehouse, or you need to transport it to the ports, and then you rent a warehouse over there? Then it will be the emissions from leased assets. Okay, and then, oh, how do you deliver your car to your customer? Okay, so these are the questions that you can think of. Okay, so next, that is the use phase. Okay, so let's say if the car that you produce is an EV. So during the use phase, then based on how much cars sold in that year, then if it's EV, then you can say that during the use phase, if they consume on the average how much electricity, and then what is the average emissions from that. Or if it is a diesel car, it is a petrol car, then how long is your car can be used? 30 years, 40 years before it's sent to landfill. Then during that 30 years, let's say, how much carbon emissions are predicted. So there'll be a few scenarios for you to consider during the use phase. And then, of course, at the end of the life, the car is broken down, cannot be repaired anymore. Then how does the distributor, or how does the customer, the consumer, typically dispose the car? Okay, so this you can also come up with some some what you call that, the scenario, different scenarios to predict how much carbon emissions can come from there. So these are my tips to you. You can use these life cycle stages as a guidance for you to start looking into all 15 categories of the Scope 3 emissions. Okay, so here, now we have been discussing about what is Scope 3. Now is why. Why Scope 3 is getting more and more attention. So the first thing is actually, according to a few studies, it says that Scope 3 often represents the largest portion of emissions. So if you measure Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3, you can see, come up with a chart, you'll realize that Scope 3 account for the most. Is that range between 70 to 90% of a company's total carbon footprint. So this this data is required for you to really understand what is the environmental impact of my company. So from there, you can know that, okay, which hotspot, what are the priority areas that I want to tackle into to make sure that I can decarbonize my company and also the supply chain. And number 2 reason is regulatory and investor pressure. As I mentioned just now, according to Bursa Malaysia, last time you only need to report 6 and 7, okay, which is the business travel and employee commuting. But since last December, when we started to adopt National Sustainability Reporting Framework, which we are using the ISSB standards or IFRS S1 and S2 standards, we are starting to look into scope 3 emissions. Okay, so as I remember the timeline for group 1 and group 2 companies, you guys have 2 years of relief period, and for group 3 companies, you guys have a 3 years relief period to start looking into your scope 3 emissions. Of course, those of you who are already started reporting category 6 and 7, just proceed with it, maintain the data tracking. Okay, so and now you can start to looking into other categories. So sometimes people will ask, do I need to report all 15 of them? Okay, because if you look into line by line, the reporting standard, it doesn't say so. So it depends on your company, the nature of business, because every company is unique. So you really need to look into the criteria, which of the 15 categories are significant, okay, are significant to your company. Then only you will consider it, quantify it, and put in your sustainability report. And the word significant is very subjective. So usually what we consider the number 1 criteria when you decide which category to report is whether you have influence over it. Because after you report, the next step is reduce. Okay, so if you want to reduce, it need to be something that you have a control or influence. Influence would be a better word, an influence over it. So my number 1 tips to everyone who wants to start looking into other scope 3 emissions is to make sure that you have the influence over it. Okay. All right. So next is number 3 reason is to strengthen the supply chain management. As we know that whenever we want to report greenhouse gas emissions, it's because of climate change. And climate change, they don't see whether, oh, do you live in Malaysia? Do you live in England? Do you live in Australia? Do you live in India? Then only climate change will choose to affect you or not. It's a global problem. Okay, so we want to make sure that our decarbonization effort is cascade along all the supply chain. And this is very important, where usually we'll need the product carbon footprint data for your scope 3 emissions. As like example, the purchase goods and services, the capital goods, and most of them are the product carbon footprint data from your supplier. Okay, and we will need the scope 3 emissions to come up with a better climate risk management and enhances our overall supply chain resilience. Okay, so a little bit of tips for you guys who wants to get started on reporting scope 3 emissions. So number 1 is to define your business goal. So when you want to report scope 3, why? Number 1, is it because to fulfill regulatory requirements? Then it's very direct, just follow what you are asked for. Is it for your own company brand enhancement? Then that one are very subjective. You will need to discuss with your management, with your board of directors, and decide on how do you want to go about it. Okay, so number 1, to define your business goal. Number 2, step 2 is to identify the scope 3 activities. So you can use the life cycle stages, that steps that I shared with you, and also to set the boundary. Okay. All right, so this means that you will need to do an initial assessment all across 15 categories. Then when you look into all of them, then you'll come up with a justification why you choose to report this category and why you choose not to report that category. Okay, you need to have this initial assessment. And we have helped our clients a lot on doing that. And only we choose that, okay, after we filter down, only these 8 or 9 categories are relevant to you. And next, step 3, then you can start to collect the data and report your emissions. So here is the key to success. Because reporting, as we mentioned, the upstream and the downstream activities, it not only involve people within your company. Last time, maybe only those environmental officer or like electrical engineer, because they have the energy data, or utilities, maintenance department, a few departments are involved. But when we say about scope 3, you can see that you need to talk to people from procurement, you need to talk to people from the finance, from the sales and marketing, because they travel to meet clients, okay? And then from the HR, how many employees do we have at the moment, okay? And also even from the shipping department. So it's a cross collaboration between departments. So now you need to like have a good relationship with everyone to make sure that they are supportive, they understand why you are doing this, and they are willing to share the data with you. And next is also from the external parties, which are the suppliers and the customers. So maybe some people will be very reluctant at first. Oh, why are you asking this data from me? It's new for them. So you will need to take initiative to start educating them, plant the seed in their mind first that, oh, we are doing this because we want to make our product greener, or we want to decarbonize our company. So that's why we need to have this, okay? And yeah, so that's a little bit of a tips for you. Although maybe they won't share the data with you in the first year, but later on, when they receive more and more requests from their other parties, then they will remember, oh, last time this company asked this data from me before, seems like it's required. Then they will start looking into it and gather the data for you. Okay, and finally, if you are already reporting scope 3 and now you are looking into improving it, okay, so get started is easy. Improving it over time will be more challenging because you are looking for other ways of doing things, okay? So for me, always is a balance between completeness and a balance with accuracy. So usually what we do for completeness, you will need data, but where does the data come from? If let's say you want to have, I would say there are free open resources online, like from US EPA, from UK DEFRA department, you can use that first to make sure that you can complete the reporting process, okay? And some of them, they will adopt ESG AI software, which 𝗵𝗱 Business Consulting, we have it. We share it with our clients as well. So you have a few selections of LCA database there. So it will be you at a more affordable, cost-efficient way, you get access to different LCA database, okay? And yeah, usually we'll start off with a global data or start off with other countries' data where it's established. Like from Malaysia, we don't have something like from US EPA, from UK DEFRA first yet, so we can reference from other countries. But once you get your data set, then we would want to move towards the other end to balance between the completeness, and then now we would want the accuracy to happen. So we'll start looking into product carbon footprint, we'll engage with our supplier to ask them for data, and we'll need to feedback to our government as well. Do you have this national data or this sectoral data? Okay. And at the end, you will need to have a third party and independent verification to make sure that your completeness and accuracy is balanced. Okay? All right, so that's all for my presentation. Okay, so I will go to the Q&A now. I can see that there are a lot of discussions happening on the comments. Thank you so much for the participation. Okay, let's look into the first question. Okay, we have a question from Michael. Hi, Michael. So Michael asks, why does scope 3, 2, and 1 does not solve the prevention of the emission on the first instance? Okay, So this is I would say, scope 1, 2, and 3, when we start to report it, is for reporting purpose, because we cannot manage what we don't measure. So from my personal experience, from my personal understanding, what I see now is that we have a guideline. We are encouraged to start measuring, collecting the data. So once we have the data, then only we can look into, okay, where are the sources? How can I tackle the source of emissions? I have two ways of doing things. I can avoid it, carbon avoidance, carbon reduction, or of course the last resort is carbon offset. Okay, so like GHG protocol, I believe they started this as a guideline to begin measuring. Then only we can look into how to reduce, how to avoid. Okay, so this is a little bit of a sharing from my own understanding, Michael. So if you have your own opinion you want to share, we can continue the discussion. Okay, thank you so much for the question, Michael. And then we have next question from Shahira. If we're using DEFRA, the EF is in kgCl2, do we still need to calculate the CH4 and the rest of the GHG? Okay, so from my experience, for the DEFRA, yes, some of them are in kgCl2E equivalent. So meaning that they already consider all the 7 types of greenhouse gas in it. So if let's say it's only CO2, from my experience is we don't need to calculate the rest of the GHG like CH4, etc. Usually they didn't consider it in the final emission factor is because it's very insignificant. Yeah, that's usually the way lah. But so far as we concern, we work with auditors and they are fine with just using the emission factor from DEFRA. Okay, thank you, Shahira, for the question. Okay, we have one question from 𝗵𝗻𝗆. Report if it's material to the company, correct? Okay, I believe your questions is directed towards when we have 15 categories. Okay, which one do we want to report, right? Yes, if it is material, but how do you measure the materiality? How do you define its material? So there are a few criteria for you to reference. Just now I mentioned is on the influence, whether you have influence over it, or you can look at the magnitude, which is the size of the carbon emissions. So this is a bit tricky. So if you don't measure it at the first place, how do you know how much percentage does it cover for all of your 15 categories carbon emissions, right? So usually they would want you to come up with some preliminary calculation to show that, okay, this amount is very insignificant, very immaterial compared to other categories. Okay, and other than that, usually they will look at the spending percentage as well. This is on the economic side. So if let's say you are spending a lot of money on buying these resources, buying these raw materials, so it's related to your financial performance. So that could be something that is material to your company. So if you want to use spending expenditure percentage as a ruler, it can as well. Thank you, 𝗵𝗻𝗆, for the question. Okay, next we have a question from 𝗵𝗲𝗱𝗆. Okay, where is the overlapping issue we expect in scope 3 and other scope 1 and 2? Okay, so this is the way I understand scope 1, 2, and 3. So people will be afraid of the double counting, right? So my scope 1 and 2 is my other company's scope 3 emissions. Because if let's take one very direct example, product carbon footprint. So when I produce a car, okay, I will need to go through the life cycle assessment, okay, for the product carbon footprint. So I will check the raw material, how much I produce and the electricity consumed, the fuel consumed, then I get my product carbon footprint. And then now my customer buy the car from me. So this will be under his scope 3 emission. So in a way, you can see that there's a gray line between the scope 1 and scope 2, scope 3 emission. Of course, we need to be careful when we calculate the overlapping issue. So one example we encounter is the electricity. Yeah, because for Malaysia, electricity, we have the emission factor from our energy commission. Okay, so example, if let's say you consume 1000 megawatt hour of electricity, then you will use the emission factor from the energy commission to calculate the scope 2. But how about the transmission loss? So for that, we'll need to use the emissions factor either from the IEA, International Energy Agency, or I think DEFRA. They have a number for it as well, or from other LCA database. So that is the thing that we need to consider. And then when we check for the emission factor from the LCA database, we need to read into it what do they consider when they are calculating the LCA emission factor for this transmission of electricity. Okay, thank you, 𝗵𝗲𝗱𝗆𝗆. Okay, we have a question from Nishalini. I would like to know how can we calculate the emissions for bus and train? I guess you are referring to the Malaysian condition. Okay, so I remember usually for transportation we'll use DEFRA. Okay, from the UK, and then but of course some of the emissions they say is for global, some of it they very direct, they tell you okay, this is only for UK, this is only for London. So then we come to a dilemma where do we want to ensure there's accuracy or we want just to complete the report first. Okay, so for bus, usually we'll just take the emission factor from the DEFRA. And then for the train, I remember they mentioned that for the light train, it's for London. So other than that, in the case of Malaysia, I came across a research paper. Okay, you can just go to Google or any browser, then you can type LRT Malaysia carbon footprint per passenger, and then I think that there'll be one research paper that come out. You can choose to use that. Of course, that is a bit outdated. It's a research paper, but it's a bit outdated. So if you want to use, you can, but anyway, you just need to give a justification. And once you complete your report, the next thing you need to do is to find a better emission factor. Of course, there's something, of course, it's not like this year you report this, next year you will see some new emission will come out, because to do the whole calculation, there are a lot of effort behind it. Okay, so but we can start feedback to the authority, feedback to the operators, and I believe people are working towards to come out with a emission factor that is for our nation, for the country. Okay. And thank you, Nisha, for the question. Next, we have a question from 𝗵𝗲𝗱𝗆𝗆 again. Open source data link, which one is follow in Europe and Asia? Okay, so I will share the link in the comment later on. Okay, so usually the most used one is the UK, the one from UK government or US EPA. And for Asia, there are a few countries that publish their own emissions factor. The one I know is like China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, I'm not sure, but China for sure, they have their own emissions factor for China use. Okay, but there is none for regional use at for now lah. It's only based in for country own use. Okay. All right, next, let's see if we have other questions. Oh, we have quite a long question. Let me show it. Okay, from Lina. We are starting to look into scope 3, 6, and 7. since we're a holding company with 6,000 staff nationwide, can we use sampling instead of collecting data from all employees? And if so, should the sample be based on total group head count or done separately for each subsidiary, 1 to 200 staff? Or 150. Also, we're referring to a GHG protocol sampling table. How do we decide the confidence level and margin of error? Okay, so I believe there are two parts of the question here. I couldn't dive deep to answer your question in today's live, but briefly what I can share with you is sampling is allowed, but as usual, you need to come up with a justification. Okay, so if let's say you are able to only collect, let's say a 40% of 80%, 95% of it, then you need to give justification why the others are not met. And then it's better if you go for verification. Then some of it they use another method. How to say, they ratio it. So let's say I have like 100 employees, right? So they can only get 75 data from 75 employees. So they will ratio it to, if let's say I have 100 employees, then what are the gaps? So they will top up a bit according to the data they have. Okay, so there are like two ways to go about it. And for the second question, for the confidence level and margin of error, there are a level. There is a like a metric table, a rubric. So it will says that like 5 levels of confidence level. Like what is your data quality? And then you need to come up with some maths lah. It's like how many points do you get for this criteria? How many points you get for that criteria? And then we'll come up with a number to quantify the confidence level. Okay, so there are maths towards it, but of course there are limited time here today, so I couldn't answer deep into it. But if let's say you want to continue the discussion, then we can discuss it offline. Okay, thank you, 𝗿𝗃𝗱𝘆, for the question. Okay, I think we are almost at the end. I will just pick the other next two questions here from Aaron. How does the lack of standardized and accessible ESG data impact the credibility and comparability of sustainability reporting among organizations? Yes, this is something that I believe everyone is facing right now, because we don't have like the one truth source of ESG data. So what we can see that now is because people are using different guidelines, different standards, so there are lack of standardization. So that is one of the reasons why ISSB or the IFRS S1 and S2, they are published, is because to make it more comparable, especially for the investor, because they are deciding where do I want to put my money to. Okay, so that is the important part where we can see the pattern, the trend is like all those individual reporting standards, they are starting to converge and merging into one. So when everyone start to use that one standard guideline, and then there are control measures in place like independent assurance, verification, then over the time, of course, maybe not within these 5 years, we need to see longer, I say like 10, like on average at least 10 years, to see that the data are being more comparable. And you can see that the impact for now is that even investors, they are very difficult to make their decision. Okay, so but it's a process, it takes time, and I'm happy that Aaron, you see this coming. But I guess when we start off anything, it's very silo, it's very individualistic, but over the time, when people see the need, then we are moving towards the same direction. But of course, this process takes time. Okay. Okay, next, I think it's the final question already. We have one question from Nawal. How do finances or investments affect Scope 3? So this one, I would say one of the most apparent way is on like last time when we procurement team, they want to buy a raw material, right? Usually they will check the quality, they'll check the pricing, that's it. But now they have one more criteria to check the product footprint. So if a raw material is produced in mass, and then sometimes in not a very good environment, it will be more affordable. But when we start to consider product carbon footprint, then it will be like balance it a bit lah. Okay, so you might need to pay more to get a low carbon product, but then in the long run, the low carbon product will be cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So you'll balance it back. Okay, so thank you all for your questions. All right, so here there's a good news for you. Thank you for staying with joining us today. So 𝗵𝗱𝗱𝗆 Consulting at the Academy will have a ESG and Sustainability workshop on 22nd. Okay, 22nd May, and there's a giveaway. Okay, so we have a giveaway for SME. All right, so if let's say you are SME, you can scan the QR code and win a free ticket to our online workshop. Okay, and the tickets is limited, but there's a way for you to win it. So if let's say you are in a public listed company and you want to start engaging with your suppliers to onboard on ESG, sustainability, or greenhouse gas emissions, share this news to them and invite them to participate to win the free ticket. Okay? All right. So if let's say you yourself, you are from SME, or you are interested to learn this, so this is a chance for you to grab this prize as well. Okay? So thank you again everyone for joining our live today. It's been very fruitful. Okay, so yeah, I will leave the QR code here for you. So yeah, okay, so thank you everyone, and I'll see you next time. Bye.